something even better lined up, not something that throws over 20 million people off insurance, raises rates by 15 to 20%, costs more. And so I think that message and the enormous grassroots activism, and I'm sure some of the people here were involved with that in many ways, really led to that. So where do we go from here? I think it's time where both sides are now going to be willing to work together. I know I am. I hope that the other side is. As your representative, my guiding principle will be, do any proposed changes to Affordable Care Act do three things. Do they expand coverage? Do they reduce costs? And do they maintain or improve quality of care? So if it meets those three criteria, I'll support it. So hopefully we're now going to be in a legislative arena where that's the discussion, right? If the discussion is, we're instead of cutting 21 million people off of insurance, will you support us if we only get rid of 8 million people? My answer will still be no, because that's the wrong discussion to have. But if we're talking about adding coverage towards the goal, of course, of universal access to health care, universal coverage, but if you can add a million or 3 million or 5 million and make your rates down if you get commercial insurance, I'm excited about those reforms. And I'm excited to work with the group of bipartisan legislators called No Labels Problem Solvers. And that's a group of 20 Republicans and 20 Democrats, give or take one or two. We meet almost every week. And we actually got a white paper out on some ideas for changing the Affordable Care Act. And so we'll see if leadership from either side picks that up. And I know in the Senate there's similar efforts now between senators on both sides. So hopefully that'll be where we go. There's ample opportunity to reduce costs. And if we can reduce costs of healthcare, and some of the ideas that we put out there include pricing transparency, negotiated rates for prescription drugs through Medicare, reimportation of prescription drugs. If we can do some of those cost reduction measures, then even with the existing pot of money, we can cover more people, right? And we can bring down rates. So I will hope to advocate for a continued focus on cost. Two other big items, just for a brief update, and I don't know if they're going anywhere, but I'll give you an update on them. The other, when President Trump was elected, the Republicans came in, they had three big things they wanted to do. Replace the Affordable Care Act, we just talked about that. Tax reform and infrastructure, okay? Now infrastructure, I'll cover briefly because it's probably not going to happen. That was one that President Trump wanted. Frankly, Speaker Ryan, Mitch McConnell, they never really were excited about or actually wanted to do. So, because it takes money. And so, if there's an opportunity to work on a real infrastructure plan for our country, not one that's based predominantly on tolls and public-private partnerships, but a real infrastructure plan. And those partnerships have their role, and I was supportive of the Highway 36 project, but frankly, we should go to those as a last resort for infrastructure. It's not where you first go, it's not where you leave it. We need to repair our roads and bridges. Tolling authorities is only a small part of that. So I don't expect that to happen, but we did lay out our criteria for Colorado very clearly around Highway 25 North, some of the mass transit that we need funded here. A lot of that is a state backlog on CDOT, but we would love to see a better federal infrastructure program. The next one is tax reform. It's hard to say where that's going at this point. I've been very supportive of the concept, and we even have some proposals. The basic concept is you get rid of a lot of loopholes and deductions, and you bring down rates. So that, if it's going to be bipartisan, it'll be revenue neutral, which means it's not costing the government any money, it's not a tax increase or decrease net, same amount of revenue. But it's doing it in a way where we simplify taxes, like what President Reagan did with the Democratic Congress in 1981 and 1984. So remember, well, those of you who I was only like 7, but I saw it. Remember when President Reagan proposed with the tax code was like this high, and they did get it down to like this. Well, it's expanded again. It just happens naturally over time. So it really is time to do that again. And if the Republicans are serious, there's plenty of Democratic support, but it's easier said than done. So there's major flaws with the two proposals that are out there, Speaker Ryan's and President Trump's. First of all, President Trump's is not revenue neutral in the least. It would blow up our deficit. It's a massive tax cut for the wealthy, with loss of over $1 trillion in lost revenue over 10 years. So it's a non-starter in the sense that it would plunge our nation far deeper into debt. Speaker Ryan's, at least is revenue neutral, and it's Kevin Brady, the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, supported by Speaker Ryan. But the main problem with it is it relies on a big new tax to reduce the other taxes. And what they call that big new tax is the border adjustment tax. and it's basically a tariff of about 20% on all imported products. And there's a number of problems that progressives and I would have with that. One is that it makes us open to reciprocal tariffs from other countries. The second is it's very regressive, right? It's like a sales tax of 20% on imported items. So think, everything that, Walmart, clothes, things that working families buy and need, costs going up 20%. It doesn't hit, it hits people who spend most of their money on consumption of products. So it's very regressive. So we don't want to see that as the linchpin of tax reform. We're open to other linchpins, and we're trying to put on the table, for instance, a broad-based carbon tax as an example of one. Another would be a broad-based VAT tax. So something like that will be needed to bring down your rates. And then the goal of the tax reform, it does bring down your rates, but the problem is effectively, if you have that huge border adjustment tax, somebody making 30, 40, 50,000, they'll be paying more taxes. That's the problem. There'll be a higher percentage of their income with that border adjustment because they don't see as big a benefit in the bringing down the income tax rates because there's already pretty low rates there. So anyway, I don't see the path for it, but again, I'm excited to work on it. I hope it happens. It's time to happen. If President Trump and the Republican leadership really rises to the occasion, maybe there could be another tax reform like there was in the 1980s. It's overdue. Our tax code is very complicated. Frankly, many special interests and lobbyists over the years have inserted favorable provisions for this industry, that industry, and those should be taken out, and the rate should be brought down for you. So hopefully that can happen. So those are the big things. Let me move on to things that you don't follow as much or might not see as much reported, but there's two very good indications very recently on the reining in of executive power for President Trump. And here's what they are. This is something that this requires Republicans to these things. So we've got Republicans, right? Because Democrats can wail about it every day, but we're in the minority in the House and Senate. So we're really talking about where we succeeded in bringing our Republican allies on board. Two things. One is in the Senate, the other was the House and Senate. The one in the Senate is they're not letting President Trump make recess appointments to any of the open positions by keeping the Senate in pro forma session over summer. Now that sounds very technical, but this is something the Senate Republicans did to President Obama, which we would expect, right, because he was of a different party. They said, you can't do appointments while we're in recess. Normally a president, when the Senate is out of session, can fill open slots with people on a temporary basis who can be there for the remainder of that Senate term, a year and a half, frankly, so they can do a lot of damage in that period of time. And the Republican Senate stopped President Obama from doing that because they stayed in pro forma session. It doesn't mean the senators actually have to be there. It means two of them have to be there, one to preside, one to say hi, open up the session. It takes 5 minutes. They do it, twice a week. The House does this sometimes too. It's a fake session, no real debate, but it's not technically a recess. It's a, so basically the Senate Republicans are now, and joined by the Democrats, of course, are saying we're not letting their own president, Trump, they don't trust his recess appointments. The Senate prerogative to approve those appointments, they are holding. So any appointments that President Trump makes will have to be approved by the Senate. So that's a very important piece of the backbone that Senate leadership got. The second one, involving the House and Senate, is we passed almost unanimously, just a few votes against it in the House, a bill that basically takes the power of the president away to remove the sanctions against Russia. And this shows that an ongoing FBI investigation by the independent counsel into potential collusion with Russia, as well as potential expansion to financial dealings with Russia by the president. It shows that the Republicans in the House, joined of course by the Democrats, do not trust the president to make that decision about removing sanctions from Russia. So we took away his ability to do that. We also included the Korea and the Iran sanctions in the bill. It passed overwhelmingly. He signed it, because had he vetoed it, he would have been even more embarrassed because we would have overridden that veto overwhelmingly. And so he was backed into signing it, and he's not able to unilaterally remove those Russian sanctions. So those are two very encouraging things, right? They really are, because it finally means that Republicans, many of them, have joined, at least on these two issues, in standing up to President Trump. Now, there are several ongoing investigations into President Trump, right? And collusion in the election, as well as financial ties. There's the House Intelligence Committee, and you might remember that one was off track for a while, and then the chairman recused himself, and it's more or less back on track. The other one is the Senate Intelligence Committee. And the third one is the independent counsel at the FBI. And so I believe that I'm optimistic that we will get to the bottom of these matters. I have trust that the system will do that. It doesn't always move fast, and I don't know whether it's 6 months or a year and a half or whatever it is, but these are professional investigators, and I think they will get to the bottom of it. And I don't believe that President Trump has the latitude to fire his own, independent counsel, fire the Attorney General. If he truly tries to do that, based on, again, what I saw with the Republicans on the Russia issue, the sanctions, and the recess appointments, I think they wouldn't stand for that. And their rhetoric has been very clear about that as well, generally speaking. It's all politics, right? And so it's easier for them too. If President Trump's at 35% approval, if he was at 50 or 60% approval, they might lose some of that backbone. But at least today, I come to you as an optimist that these investigations will be completed. I don't know where they're going, right? None of us should prejudge, and none of us know. There's little things that leak out here and there. And by the way, President Trump is correct about the damage of leaks. I do hope they do something about that. Well, we love to see that stuff. It's fun. It's not good. It's not good. It's not good for the system. There shouldn't be leaks. The FBI should complete their investigation, release their findings. If there's criminal charges, they should make them. Senate and House Intelligence Committees should do their work, and hopefully with General Kelly there, they'll figure out the situation with the leaks. So anyway, I think we'll get to a lot of that. So let me move to a couple other items that I've been working on for you. These are small things, but they're, where we can make bipartisan progress, they tend to be small things. So I'm excited about it because we want to do some good work with Colorado. One is, we were able to reintroduce just last week our bipartisan bill to legalize industrial hemp. This is the crop, used for everything from clothing to ropes. We currently, it's legal to use in Colorado. We have to always import it for the commercial industry from Canada and other countries. We have some small-scale farms here. Now, we can introduce this for several sessions, but the difference is we now have gotten, my Republican League's Representative Comer of Kentucky, we now have gotten the Republican chair of the Judiciary Committee, Bob Goodlatte of Virginia, on board, and we actually expect to move the bill. So I actually think we will, through the House, and then hopefully it'll pass the Senate. It's another issue that Mitch McConnell's been helpful on, because Kentucky, like Colorado, has trying to be a leader in hemp. I think there's a better than even chance we'll actually get that done this session. We're certainly going to, I think, pass it out of the House. I'm very excited about that because we've worked on that bill for a long time. The other area is education that I do a lot of work on. I'm the ranking Democrat on the Early Childhood and Kindergarten through 12th Grade Education Committee. And so a lot of that, of course, is standing up to Secretary DeVos's efforts to attack our public schools, defending our public schools. And to do that, also defending off some of the funding cuts, that are devastating funding cuts, by the way, that have been proposed in President Trump's budget. Some of them are mirrored in the House Republican budget. These include the elimination of teacher training dollars under Title II, actually zeroed out. It involves major cutbacks in some of the free and reduced lunch money, which is targeted to our schools that serve our most at-risk population. Those of you who work in education, makes a big difference, helps fund 2 or 3 additional teachers or literacy coaches at some of the schools that serve the most at-risk kids. So we're going to be very busy defending those. And keep in mind, while the Republicans House Republicans and President Trump are cutting every important investment in our future, whether it's science, which affects our economy locally as well, and NOAA and NIST, whether it's education, they're cutting to the bone, they're actually increasing federal spending because they're increasing the military spending side so much. And unfortunately, the House just passed a military authorization bill, record levels of military spending, over 650, that increase of over $80 billion, far more than the cuts in all the other areas. So what I argue that this will do is, without investing in it in our own country, in America, in our education, in our science, in our leadership, we're going to have a hollowed out country. Yes, it'll be well protected, but what is left to protect if we don't invest in our own future prosperity? So it's an interesting time, right? It really is. Congress is in recess now, which is why we're holding a number of town halls across the district. We don't go back till September. We'll see what's on tap. Speaker Ryan has still said it'll be tax reform. We'll see if there's an opportunity to work there. And look forward to hearing your thoughts and input as well. One final issue I thought we should address, since we're in Broomfield, is some of the oil and gas issues that are affecting the I want to thank the leadership of Representative Matt Gray, who's here with us, who, along with others, leave a letter saying at least the COGCC should have their meeting in an area that's accessible to Broomfield residents. In terms of the ongoing iterative process, and as you know, some of the wells have been moved out of Broomfield in the proposed project, but at least don't require that Broomfield residents drive 7 hours and probably spend the night in Durango just to have their voice heard in an issue that affects our backyard. So whatever the decision is, look Broomfield residents in the face. And Representative Gray and I certainly agree that the COGCC should try to always allow for input from community members, and frankly, adding logistical difficulties and distance to that. Whether it was delivered or not, I don't know, but it certainly gives the appearance that they're scared of y'all. I don't know whether that's the case or not, but it certainly gives that appearance. So with that, let's open it up. Where's Mara, or who's doing
right behind you.
Okay, there you go.
Great, so just as a reminder, I'm going to be calling 3 names. If you could please stand up, make yourself known so our 2 interns can grab a mic to you. If you also still have a question that you would like to ask Congressman Polis, make sure to wave your card. Our interns will make sure to grab those as well. So our first topic is actually going to be on the environment. Our first question comes from David from Longmont, Penny from 80020, and Joy from Broomfield. So stand up, make
David,
yourself
Penny, and
known.
Joy. And we will after, by the way, after the prepared comments, we try to do this so we get different areas, but we'll also take a few from the floor afterwards too. So don't worry if you didn't get your question in, we'll be happy to take it. Who do we want to start with?
Hi.
Hi, David.
Representative, I'm concerned lifelong on the environment, and my question on the card was very general, but I think I'd like to kind of focus in on where do you think the opportunities to change the Republican mindset about climate change exist, and how we can make that a goal again to address in science.
That's a very good question. And if you look at, for instance, Europe, the conservative and the liberal parties in England and Germany, they might disagree on solutions, but they both agree on the science. And you're not going to see the conservative parties in England or in Germany or in France issuing ill-informed climate denial statements. Now again, there's different types of solutions, and I think that's a discussion that we should be happy to have. I hope that's where the Republicans are headed here. Certainly it's where a few of them are. We have a first step for them. We've created a climate caucus in Congress that is deliberately bipartisan, and I don't know the exact number, but we have a number of Republicans in that now, a dozen or so, maybe a little bit more, that at least are willing to take that base of publicly identifying with an area of concern around climate. And frankly, even the Republican talking points on climate have evolved for the better, because 10 years ago, it's not happening, there's no climate change. You don't hear that much anymore. Now it's, yes, we see the climate change, we don't know if humans are causing it, we don't know why, but the facts, the change itself is undeniable. So that's an evolution. It's better than complete denial. And on some of the solutions as well, the case we're making, for instance, on a carbon tax, that's more of an economic case. And again, I don't have high hopes for tax reform, and as a subset of that, I don't necessarily have high hopes that a carbon tax would be part of that. But the reason it's even being talked about is they need a revenue source, and so if we're not accepting the border adjustment tax, and they want Democrats to support bringing down tax rates, we say, why don't we look at a carbon tax or a broad-based VAT? But a carbon tax would help, because it would cause a lot of Democrats to be more inclined to vote for it in terms of bringing down rates. So again, progress is slow, but I think it's important to continue the education efforts. And that means all of you as well, right? It means talking to your friends and neighbors, it means letters to the editor, it means posting good information on your social media backed by science, because it's all about educating people. So at least, hopefully, in the future we'll be at a point where the evolution will be, yes, it's caused by human activity, let's talk about what we can do about it.
Penny and Joy?
I'm Joy. Hi, thank you for being here this morning. My question is about legislation that you have sponsored, the 100 by 2050.
Yeah.
And my question is, how can you encourage all parties to popularize this legislation and get it passed so that we are 100% renewable energy by 2050?
So we just introduced a couple weeks ago a very exciting bill that has a roadmap to move our entire country to 100% renewable energy by 2050. Very achievable, very doable in terms of how we talk about it. Of course, we talk about climate, but we also have many other selling points, right? We talk about clean air and clean water. We talk about green jobs. We talk about a lot of the other, we talk about independence, not relying on global markets that are beyond our control for our energy prices, saving consumers money. So a lot of selling points, and it's a very detailed plan, a very detailed roadmap to get there. And there's a Senate companion bill introduced by Senator Sanders and Wyden and others. And yes, with the current composition of Congress, we don't expect to pass that bill tomorrow, but it's something to build and work towards, right? It's a much more comprehensive approach than some of the earlier attempts, which I supported, at cap and trade, or people have talked about just a carbon tax. Again, those policies can have their merits, but if we truly want to transition the economy, we need to look at it holistically. And so that's what this bill does, and I encourage you to look at it. We have some information on polis.house.gov, our website. The other thing that needs to happen in the short term, given that we're not likely to pass this bill tomorrow, or President Trump's not likely to sign it, is local governments, states, and private businesses need to really step up as well on climate and carbon. And we see that on the private business side. Last week or 2 weeks ago in Washington, a coalition of 40 large businesses that are going to continue to maintain their commitments to the Paris Accords, despite American businesses, despite President Trump pulling up, networking, promoting what they're doing. Our very own, Broomfield's very own, Vail Resorts just announced that they are committing to 100% renewable energy. So it's still happening, despite the void of national leadership, but we hope to kind of reassert that voice through our 100 by 50 bill.
I understand that this is more of a state issue, but how do you think Broomfield can best protect itself from the dangers of drilling?
It is more a state issue. Now, there's certainly a federal nexus, because not here in Broomfield, but in many areas we're talking about drilling on our public lands and our federal lands. And so one of the things that they're stripping away now are protections that President Obama put in place around methane emissions, around the planning process. Effectively, they're moving to fast track approval on drilling on public lands, remove the existing methane rule that we have. Now, that's not so much an issue in the Front Range. Most of the drilling is private land, but in western Colorado, that's a very big issue because it's public lands. Here in Colorado, there's a number of ways that we can give communities more of a say and more of a seat at the table, and I think that's all communities want, frankly. Communities know that it's a nuanced issue. They know it's a complicated issue. They know the value of what's under the ground, but they just want to have a say in what's at the table, so that it's not an unelected panel in Durango that makes every decision that's important for Broomfield residents. And so hopefully that'll be the way that the state can move.
Our next three questions, we're going to stick with the environment. One comes from Jim Griffiths, Kayla Burkle, and Larry Cooper. Again, if you could stand up and raise your hand so we can get a microphone over to you, we'd appreciate it. Make yourselves known. There we go. Thank you.
Hello, Jerry. Larry Cooper. I have a question for you about the environment, but it really has to do with chemical companies in our country that are controlling not just our food source with the herbicides and pesticides they're using, and the glyphosate that's polluting our land. And now California has labeled glyphosate as a carcinogen. We know that a lot of these products are causing a lot of problems with people, especially cancer. And now they also own the other side, the pharmaceutical portion. Are we looking at what the heck they're doing to us? I mean, they're basically poisoning us and then trying to heal us. I don't agree with that.
Thank you, Eric. project, but it's very specific, so I'll have to look into those and get back to you, and I'll give you a call the next week. So certainly, we should care a lot about what we need and what we consume, and there's a direct effect on health. I was at in East Boulder County last week. There's a new nonprofit that's focused on bringing back heritage grains, the type of wheat that they would have grown in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s. When we all imagine wheat fields, right, we're thinking wheat like this. A lot of the GMO varieties they grow today, the industrial wheat is like this high. That's what it is, and it's been engineered for production, not for health, not for flavor. A lot of the movement is led both by nutritionists as well as chefs, because the flavor and the nutrition side has completely gone away. And it's very exciting though to see that there's a movement now around that. But we'll be happy to call you back on your specific issue, just to make sure we get your contact information.
I've lived in Broomfield most of my life, and what my biggest concern as far as energy and renewables is also jobs. And what are your plans to bring those renewable energy jobs to Broomfield so that way we can be sustainable and that way we have clean energy and protect our environment? So what are you going to do for us to help us make sure that we have clean renewable energy?
Great. In our 100 by 50 plan, there are hundreds of thousands of green energy jobs that will be created, and some of those will be production jobs, right? And you're not likely to have large-scale wind facilities in Broomfield, and mostly be in the Eastern Plains. But a lot of those also will be technology enabling jobs, and of course, in the Denver, Broomfield, Boulder area, there are many companies that are working on solar solutions, on wind technology. I visited a number of them. So we have a lot of those companies here today, and the more focus we put nationally on deploying wind and solar energy, the more benefit there will be for companies that are doing research and development, and the more capital there will be for companies doing research and development. So it's a part of the economy here today. I think if we emphasize it nationally, we are positioned as leaders here in Colorado. Part of that is because of the nexus of our institutions of higher education, CSU and CU. Part of that is because we already are a leader in deploying this technology with our existing 30% renewable energy portfolio standard. Part of that is the presence of the federal labs, NREL and Golden, National Renewable Energies Laboratory, including spin-off technology from NREL, that licensed by local companies here in the Denver, Broomfield, Boulder area that are growing. So as we talk about the 100% by 2050 plan, we also want to make sure we position our region as a leader. We have that leadership role today, and that leadership role will become even more important as the industry grows. Very good question.
Hello. Thank you for being here. It's great because it brings our community together in a pretty cool way. I'm just curious how, I think I heard some of your answer already, but how can we support your efforts here locally, especially with these climate change issues? What can we do locally to help direct Washington?
Yeah, I think, look, if you look at how people get their information and news these days, it's very different than it was, 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. And there's probably a reason that we have a kind of, some people call it a post-factual world. I'm sure we'll get to the border wall in a little bit. Somebody will ask about that. We'll tell a little story about that. But I think the thing that you can do is be ambassadors of truth. And that means, again, using your personal relationships, your social media, information, making sure that people in your circles, including people that are in your social circle but don't agree ideologically, and you're not trying to hit them hard and say, vote for this person or be in this party. What you're trying to do is give them and show them good, well thought out articles about climate change, about renewable energy. And vet them yourself too, because there's bad stuff out there on all sides, right? So look at reputable, science-backed information, articles in scientific magazines or in newspapers, and share them with people, right? It's not as confrontational as why are you supporting, this president? He's horrible for this reason, that reason, this reason. You're not, you don't get anywhere with that. How far did the people, if you are of that side, that I'm on, remember all the people that really hated Obama, right? That didn't get anywhere with you. They just seemed a little nuts. So just imagine the shoe on the other foot. That if you go in hard hitting about, he's beholden to Russians and he's this and he's that, and those things all may very well be true. But that's not how you move people. Just take the politics, the day-to-day politics out of it, and just be ambassadors of truth and try to get good, useful information to your circles.
We're now going to talk about healthcare. Our next two questions come from Diana from Broomfield and Jim Hutter from Broomfield as well, and from Ranch.
Hi, I'm Jim, and I don't know how this is on or not.
Good.
All right. If you remember Anthem Ranch and triumvirates of choice, I'll start with that. You have described that as sort of out there, far-reaching, isn't going to happen tomorrow. It's a goal. It's something you can describe. I'd like to suggest the same approach for healthcare. I want to know what all the Democrats in Congress who support single-payer, universal, national health care think is that plan. I don't expect you to achieve it. I'm thrilled that you're one of the problem solvers. But we in this country have heard next to nothing about Canada, Sweden, Finland, whatever, Germany. What would be the best plan? And I do not think it would be Medicare for all. That's sort of the cheaper thing. And being on Medicare, I've got some problems with that. What would be the model that you hear talked about the most?
And as you know, I do support, whoa, that's loud. Hello. I don't know what happened there. Is that okay? Too loud? Okay. I do support Medicare for all. I would also agree with you that, well, first of all, you may agree with me too. It's better than what we have now. I certainly believe that. It's universal. It allows people to get supplemental insurance on top of that, but it provides a basic level of care for everybody. So I think it's far better than what we have now. But you're also right that there are other, even better ideas out there that would be better than Medicare for all. I mean, we should learn from and look at what other countries do, what works, what doesn't work. I'm not in favor of government running healthcare facilities like they do in England. I don't think that works. I truly think the intervention is at the payer level, that we should have a public enterprise that does this. But it might not be as simple as a Medicare for all. It might be a multi-tiered system. But I think getting it off the backs of employers, and I say this as somebody who's started a number of companies, would be an immense benefit to the business sector in our country. It's very, especially for small companies when you're starting out and your fourth or fifth or sixth hire basically has to be an HR person to administer benefits. That takes away from your core mission of your company. It's an unfair burden to put on American businesses that in most of the developed world they don't have. So I absolutely think the universal Medicare for all would be better, but at the same time, I'm very open to other ideas too. So right now, for simplicity of messaging, many of them, not all the Democrats, but many of them, myself included, do talk about universal payer, Medicare for all. But I don't think that should be read to mean that we're not open to other things. I certainly am, and if we're actually in a position to do policy, we probably want to have more of a process around it. Now it's more messaging. We want it to be universal, and it's not about